My name is Emily Carter, and the moment my family decided I no longer belonged to them didn't happen in a courtroom or after months of drawn-out litigation. It happened right at the Thanksgiving dinner table, in the old colonial house in Concord, Massachusetts, the place where I grew up, where the maple leaves blaze red every fall, and where I once believed blood ties would forever be the strongest bond. It was the last Thursday in November, bitterly cold as only New England can be. The house was filled with a scent of golden roasted turkey stuffed with thyme and sage, mashed sweet potatoes topped with melting marshmallows, vibrant red cranberry sauce, and of course, warm pumpkin pie fresh from the oven. From the living room, the TV blared the cheers of the New England Patriots versus Dallas Cowboys game, a non-negotiable tradition for the holiday. Everyone was laughing and talking animatedly, raising glasses and toasts, taking turns sharing what they were grateful for that year, as is the American custom. New jobs, health, children. I sat at my old spot at the table, the one I'd had since childhood, quietly observing. My father, William Carter, now 70, sat at the other end, his eyes sometimes distant from Alzheimer's. My mother, Margaret, still tried to maintain her familiar retired teacher smile, but I could see the tension in the corners of her eyes. Next to her was my sister, Sarah Carter Hayes, 35, her blonde hair perfectly styled, always knowing how to draw every eye. Her husband, Tom Hayes, was telling some story about the real estate market in Cambridge, making everyone nod approvingly. My aunt and uncle, cousins, Aunt Clara, Uncle Robert, Jake, Lily, all were there, as they were every year. Before the meal, as usual, we'd had a small debate, the kind typical of modern American families on holidays. Sarah, with her increasingly conservative views, said Thanksgiving was a time to remember the first settlers who built this country with honest labor. I, on the other hand, gently mentioned the native perspective, that for many, the holiday is a day of mourning. The conversation was quickly cut short by my mother's, "Come on, girls, today is about unity," and everyone laughed it off and moved on to another topic. But I caught Sarah's glance sliding over me, cold, warning. I remembered the Thanksgivings of my childhood. Dad taking Sarah and me out to the backyard to throw snowballs, Mom calling us in because the smell of baking had spread. We sat around the table, Dad telling stories of how Grandpa served in World War II, Mom teaching us a short prayer before the meal. Those memories were once so warm, I thought they were indestructible. Now, sitting in the familiar room, I felt like a stranger. The meal passed with forced laughter. As everyone was finishing dessert, Sarah suddenly stood up. She raised her glass of red wine, smiling radiantly as if about to deliver a beautiful toast. "Before we end this wonderful evening," she began, her voice sweet but loud enough to drown out the TV, "I want to say a few words." Everyone fell silent, waiting. I felt my heart slow, as if my body already knew what was coming. Sarah looked around the table, her gaze lingering on Dad, then Mom, then finally on me. "In the past year, our family has faced many challenges," she continued, her tone growing serious. "We've had to confront difficult decisions, disagreements, and actions that have hurt the unity of our family." Mom nodded slightly. Dad stared down at his remaining pie. "After many private conversations, after all of us have thought it through carefully," Sarah took a deep breath, "we've come to a collective decision. We've voted." She paused, looking straight at me. "And Emily, you're not family anymore." The room was dead silent for a second. Then the clapping began, not enthusiastic, but enough to chill my blood. Aunt Clara clapped first, then Uncle Robert, then Jake and Lily followed. Tom Hayes laughed loudly, raising his glass as if it were a victory. My mother, Margaret, looked at me with red eyes, whispering, "We need unity, Emily. This is for the good of the family." My father didn't clap. He just sat there, his gaze distant, as if he didn't fully understand what was happening. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't stand up and leave. I just sat still, feeling a strange calm spread through my chest, because I had known this was coming, because I had prepared. I smiled faintly. Not a happy smile, but the smile of someone who had long accepted the truth. I slowly reached into the bag at my feet, pulled out a thick navy blue folder. No trembling, no hesitation. I slid it across the polished oak table, stopping it right in front of Sarah. "I guess you won't need this anymore," I said, my voice steady, clear. Sarah looked at the folder, then at me, her eyes flashing surprise mixed with contempt. She smirked, opening it as if it were just a childish prank. The first page. Her eyes scanned the lines quickly. The smile vanished. The second page. Her face went pale, her hand trembling slightly. The third page. She gasped sharply, her chair scraping loudly as she shot to her feet. A raw, pained scream tore from Sarah's throat. Not an angry shout, but the scream of someone stripped bare of every cover. A raw, agonizing scream that echoed through the old house. The clapping stopped instantly. Forks clattered onto plates. The TV still played the game, but no one was listening anymore. All eyes turned to Sarah, then to the folder, then to me. I just sat there, calmly watching my sister, the one who had just declared me erased from the family, now shaking, eyes red, mouth stammering incoherently. That Thanksgiving night, the warm scent of turkey was gone. Only cold, sharp truth remained, laid bare on the dinner table. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Sarah held the folder as if it were just harmless paper, a belated joke from the little sister she had just publicly disowned. She smirked, slowly flipping open the cover, confident, as if opening an early Christmas card. I sat still, hands lightly folded in my lap under the table. My heart beat steadily, neither fast nor slow. My hands didn't shake. The voice in my head was strangely clear. This is justice, Emily. Not revenge, just justice. The kind Americans still pride ourselves on believing in, even when it arrives late. The first page was a Bank of America statement from the joint savings account Dad had opened back when he was an engineer at General Electric. The numbers were highlighted in red. $8,500 withdrawn on March 14th of last year, $12,000 on July 9th, $15,000 on November 2, all transferred to an account in the name of Sarah Carter Hayes. I had bolded each transaction, complete with exact dates and times. Sarah was still smiling, but the smile was starting to freeze. The second page held Dad's handwritten notes. His handwriting was shaky, no longer neat as before, but still unmistakably his. I recognized it from the way he made the big W at the start of his name. Ask Sarah about $8,500. She said it was to help pay Dad's credit card debt. Another line, missing $12,000 again. Did I already talk to Sarah? And the last line that nearly made me cry when I found it. Emily takes care of me every day. Don't let anyone take that away. Sarah flipped to the third page. It was an email from the bank to Dad, one he could never read because by then he had long forgotten his online banking password. The email warned of unusually large transactions and requested identity verification. There was no response from Dad, only traces of transfers made from an IP address in Cambridge, the address of Sarah's house. Sarah's face drained of color. Her eyes widened, her lips trembled. She flipped faster, as if hoping the later pages would refute the earlier ones. But they didn't. Just more statements, more notes, more bank confirmation emails that the transactions were executed via the mobile app using registered fingerprint login. Sarah's fingerprint, because she had once helped Dad set it up to make managing finances easier. She let out a choked sound, not words, but the sound of someone just plunged into ice water. Her chair scraped harshly against the old wooden floor as she stood. Then the scream burst from her throat, uncontainable, a shattered, pained, desperate scream. The room went dead. Aunt Clara's fork dropped onto her china plate with a sharp clink. Uncle Robert, who had clapped most enthusiastically, whispered, "What the hell?" his voice faltering, eyes glued to the papers in Sarah's hands. Jake and Lily, the cousins, stared at each other in horror.
Tom Hayes, Sarah's husband, went ashen, mouth open but speechless. My mother, Margaret Carter, raised a hand to her mouth. Her eyes, for the first time in months, no longer looked at me with reproach. She looked at Sarah, looked for a long time, as if trying to recognize the daughter she had trusted absolutely. My father sat quietly, his gaze distant as usual, but I noticed a slight frown. He might not understand everything, but he sensed something wrong was happening to his older daughter. I still sat motionless. In my mind echoed something Dad had taught me when I was young, when he took me to a Red Sox game at Fenway Park. In America, Emily, the truth doesn't always win fast, but it wins. Today, the truth had won, not with shouts, not with tears.
Just with numbers, shaky handwriting, and the heavy silence that now enveloped the room. Sarah clutched the folder like a bomb, eyes red, tears starting to fall. She looked at me, for the first time in months, not with contempt, but with real fear. I said nothing more. There was no need. The TV still broadcast the game commentary, but no one heard it. The turkey smell had gone cold. The pumpkin pie sat untouched. I just sat there, feeling a strange relief spread through my chest. Not the joy of victory, just clarity. The truth had been placed on the dinner table, among the leftover food and half-empty wine glasses. And for the first time that Thanksgiving night, I felt I truly belonged here, not because of blood, but because I had chosen to stay with the truth. 5 years earlier, everything began to crumble quietly, like the way snow falls thickly in New England. At first, just a few silent flakes. Then suddenly, the whole world is blanketed white. I still remember that day clearly, January, bitterly cold in 2020, when my father, William Carter, was admitted to Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston for what doctors called a routine heart procedure. He had been a brilliant mechanical engineer at General Electric, a man proud of his health, running along the Charles River every morning, eating plain oatmeal, checking his blood pressure as regularly as his watch. "My heart's as strong as an athlete's," he used to joke. The surgery was successful. The head of cardiology patted our shoulders. "He'll be home in a few days." But then complications came, a minor stroke in the night after the procedure. No one could have predicted it. The American healthcare system, modern as it is, still can't prevent those small but cruel surprises. When I rushed to the hospital, Dad was awake, but his eyes were different. He looked at me, smiled, and asked, "Margaret, is Emily coming for dinner tonight?" I froze. Margaret is my mother's name. The first time he mistook me for her, not because we looked alike, but because in his mind, time had begun to overlap. In the days that followed, the signs appeared gradually, subtle enough that at first we convinced ourselves they were just side effects of medication. Dad repeated the same story about a fishing trip to Cape Cod in 1987 at least 3 times in one dinner. He put his car keys in the fridge, then searched the whole house as if someone had hidden them. Once he stood in the kitchen, wooden spoon in hand, looking around confused. What was I about to do? My mother, Margaret, was the first to shoulder everything. A retired elementary school teacher, accustomed to caring for others, she naturally took the primary role. She organized his medications, drove him to follow-ups, cooked his favorites, New England-style beef stew, clam chowder. She patiently reminded him of every little thing. "Bill, take your blood pressure pill. Bill, today is Tuesday, not Sunday." She did it all with her familiar teacher smile, but I saw her growing weary. At night, when I called from my small apartment in Boston, Mom would whisper, "I'm fine, just a bit tired," but her voice trembled. Once she cried over the phone, "I don't know if I'm doing this right, Emily." Today he asked if I was his old girlfriend. I heard her trying to stifle the sobs, and I knew she was reaching her limit. I came back to Concord every weekend I could. I saw Mom getting thinner, dark circles under her eyes. She still tried, sticky notes all over the house, alarms for every pill, even learning to use health tracking apps on her iPad. But Alzheimer's isn't something you can defeat with one person's persistence.
It requires constant care, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. One autumn afternoon that year, I came home and found Mom sitting on the front steps, head bowed onto her knees. Red maple leaves fell softly around her. I sat beside her without speaking. After a long while, she looked up, eyes red. "I can't keep up anymore, Emily. I'm afraid one day I'll forget to lock the door, or forget to feed him. I don't want him in a nursing home, but I'm not strong enough." I hugged her. And in that moment, I knew the responsibility had shifted to me. I remembered my favorite memory of Dad. The summer I was 16, he taught me to drive on the winding country roads around Concord. He sat in the passenger seat, patiently instructing, "Easy on the gas, feel the car, don't stomp. Check your mirrors before turning, always." He laughed loudly when I stalled the car for the third time. No problem. Even Abraham Lincoln failed many times before succeeding. That was the strong, confident man who had always been the family's rock. Now he sat on the living room sofa, staring out at the blazing autumn leaves, asking me, "Is Emily going to school today?" I smiled and said, "It's summer break, Dad," even though my heart ached. I was the only one who could change my life without disrupting too much. Single, marketing job, fully remote, no husband or children to negotiate with. Sarah was married, living in Cambridge, busy with real estate and 2 young kids. Mom had already done her best. So I decided. I gave up my Boston apartment, packed my belongings into a few cardboard boxes, and moved back to the old house in Concord, where the maple leaves still fell every autumn, where Dad once taught me to drive, and where I would now learn to navigate a new road, caring for a father gradually losing himself in his own memories. I didn't know that decision would lead to the Thanksgiving dinner 5 years later, when the entire family would turn their backs on me. Back then, I only thought one simple thing. Dad had been my rock for 32 years. Now it was my turn. After that afternoon when Mom sat defeated on the steps amid falling red leaves, I knew I couldn't delay any longer. The decision didn't come like a dramatic lightning bolt, but like a country road in Massachusetts gradually emerging from the fog. I just had to keep walking. I was 32, single, living in a cute little apartment in Boston's Back Bay. My digital marketing job for a Cambridge agency was fully remote, a perk the pandemic had just brought to many Americans. I had no husband, no kids, no fixed schedule to negotiate with anyone. My life could bend without breaking. Sarah had her own family, 2 young children, and a real estate career that was picking up steam in Cambridge. Mom was exhausted. I called Sarah first, before making it official. She was in her office, her voice echoing through the car speaker. "I'm thinking of moving back to Concord to care for Dad full time," I said. Silence for a moment. Then she laughed, a short, polite, but cold laugh. "Emily, I really appreciate the thought, honestly. But I have several big deals in the seaport, plus the kids in private school, packed schedule. I can only come on weekends. And Mom's still managing fine, right?" I heard her husband Tom say something from the passenger seat. Sarah continued, "I think you should think carefully. Your life in Boston is stable. Don't let Mom and Dad drag you down. This is long term, you know?" I didn't argue, just said, "I understand," and hung up. But in my heart, I knew. Sarah wouldn't change her schedule. She had good reasons, or at least she thought so. Mom was different. When I told her my plan, she looked at me for a long time, then hugged me tightly right in the kitchen. "You don't have to do this, Emily," she whispered, voice trembling. "I want to, Mom." She nodded, eyes red. "I'll try to help more." But both of us knew she had already reached her limit, so I acted quickly, ended my Boston lease in just 1 month, packed my belongings into 10 cardboard boxes, clothes, books, laptop, a few wall paintings, and a cactus I'd kept since college. I drove my old Subaru back to Concord on a chilly November morning, maple leaves blowing across the windshield. The old house welcomed me with the familiar scent of pine wood and creaking floors. Dad sat in his living room armchair, looking at me like a familiar guest. "Emily home for the weekend?" "No, Dad, I'm moving back for good." He smiled vaguely, nodded. "Good. Stay for dinner."
I began changing the house gently but thoroughly. The living room was no longer just a place to watch TV comfortably. I placed a small table next to Dad's sofa with a large print medication schedule, blood pressure tracker, and a daily journal. What time he ate, slept, how his mood was. I bought a big digital clock for the wall that gently chimed medication times. On the old bookshelf, I organized pill bottles by color and order. White pill at 8 a.m., blue at 8 p.m. The kitchen became command central. I stuck reminders on the fridge. Don't let Dad cook alone. The medicine cabinet was locked, key always in my pocket. I learned to cook simple versions of his favorites: New England chicken soup, slow-cooked beef, sugar-free apple pie. The smell of food spread through the house, gradually replacing the stale scent of loneliness. Mom visited a few times a week, bringing homemade oatmeal cookies or clean clothes for Dad. She tried to help, folding laundry, dusting, but I saw her tire faster than before. She often sat with Dad for a while, then quietly left early. I still have to shop for my own house, she said. I didn't blame her. She had carried the first 5 years. Now it was my turn. The early days were hard. Dad resisted out of instinct, a man who had been independent his whole life. He got angry when I reminded him to take pills. He tried to drive to the supermarket alone and got lost coming home. Once he looked at me hurt. You think I can't take care of myself anymore? I just hugged him, said nothing. But then the warm moments began to seep in. One Sunday afternoon in autumn, the Patriots were playing a big game. I turned on the TV, pulled a chair close to Dad. He looked at the screen, his eyes lighting up even if he no longer remembered all the rules. Is Brady still playing? He asked. Brady retired, Dad. Now it's Mac Jones.
He nodded, then suddenly recounted. Back in the day, your grandpa and I used to watch football like this. Grandpa liked the Giants. I laughed, got him a light non-alcoholic beer, the kind the doctor allowed. We watched the whole game, him cheering every time the Patriots scored, even if he might not remember who he was rooting for. It was the first time in months I saw him truly happy. Then came the first Thanksgiving I was home full-time. I woke early to roast the turkey, stuffing it with sage and onions. Dad sat in the kitchen watching me, occasionally advising, add a bit of rosemary, it smells better. We ate dinner just the three of us. Mom was busy at Sarah's. After the meal, Dad suddenly said, same as last year, right? The whole family around the table, laughing. He paused, confused because he couldn't remember clearly. I took his hand. Yes, just like last year, Dad. And this year is beautiful too. He smiled, eyes glistening. That was the moment I knew I had chosen right. I didn't think I was sacrificing. I just thought I was giving back a small part of what Dad had given me for 32 years. I didn't know that choice would lead to the biggest conflict of my life, when the entire family, including Mom and Sarah, would turn away. Back then, I only saw one simple thing. The old house in Concord had laughter again, warm food smells, and me, beside the father, gradually forgetting everything except his love for his daughter. The days of caring for Dad became my new rhythm, slow but relentless, like the rustle of maple leaves outside the Concord window every fall. I woke at 6 when New England was still misty and biting cold. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, the kind Dad had loved since his General Electric days. I made a black cup for him, no sugar, a milky one for myself, then gently entered the living room where he had dozed in his armchair overnight. Dad usually woke with a dreamy look. Is Emily going to school today? He'd ask, voice hoarse. I smiled, sat beside him. It's summer break, Dad. He nodded, as if satisfied with the familiar answer. Some days he thought I was still at Harvard, where I graduated nearly 10 years ago. I didn't correct him. Correcting only confused him more. I just held his hand, feeling the thin skin, prominent veins. I learned to anticipate every small change in him. Around 10 in the morning, his energy dropped noticeably, eyes drowsy, speech slower. That was when I made herbal tea, played old jazz he loved, Miles Davis or John Coltrane, and sat reading beside him. At noon, I cooked simple lunches, turkey sandwiches, garden salads from the backyard. I cut everything small for easy chewing, placed the plate in front of him, like for an elderly child. Afternoons, if the weather was nice, we went to the backyard. Leaves rustled underfoot.
wind carrying the scent of damp earth and pine from the nearby conservation land. Dad sat on the old wooden bench, looking at the blazing red maples. Sometimes he suddenly told stories from his youth, stories I'd never heard when he was healthy. When I was 20, I drove trucks from Boston to New York all night, listened to Elvis on the radio, smoked Marlboros, thought I was king of the highway. He laughed hoarsely, eyes bright in rare lucid moments. I listened, memorizing every detail, knowing tomorrow he might forget it all. We cooked together, as much as he could. One Saturday evening, I decided to make a mini turkey, like a dress rehearsal for Thanksgiving. I stuffed it with sage, onions, and dry bread. Dad sat at the counter, shaky hands sprinkling salt and pepper. "Add a bit of rosemary," he said, voice certain as in the old days. The scent of roasting herbs filled the house, warm and familiar. When the turkey was golden, I cut a small piece for his plate. He ate slowly, eyes closed, savoring. "Tastes like your mom used to make." I turned away so he wouldn't see my eyes well up. Mom visited a few times a week, bringing homemade oatmeal cookies or fruit from the Lexington Farmers Market. She sat with Dad a bit, asked polite questions, then shifted to talking about Sarah. "Sarah just sold a $5 million house in Cambridge. She's so talented." She said it with pride I'd never heard when talking about me. "She says she'll come this weekend, but she's so busy." I nodded, said nothing. Mom stayed less than an hour, then left, leaving me with Dad and the house's silence. I understood her favoritism toward Sarah, the successful child, with husband, kids, glittering career, and me, just the single daughter who came home to care for an aging father. In Mom's eyes, that probably wasn't success. I changed gradually, without realizing. I became stronger, learning to lift Dad when he slipped, staying calm when he raged because he forgot his own name, smiling when he called me Margaret for the 5th time in a day. But I also grew lonelier. Evenings after Dad slept, I sat alone in the kitchen with a cold cup of tea, listening to the wind howl through the cracks. Old friends in Boston drifted away. They had their own lives, parties, dating, travel. I only had medication schedules, meals, and rare lucid moments. But in that loneliness, I learned the lesson Americans proudly call self-reliance, the very thing Emerson wrote about right here in Concord, just a few miles from my house. I no longer waited for help. I taught myself to change light bulbs, fix leaky faucets, drive Dad to Boston doctors through thick snow. I reminded myself I was strong enough, that caring for Dad wasn't a burden, but a responsibility I chose, and I was proud of it. Some nights I sat by the window, watching leaves fall in the yellow street light, listening to the old clock tick. I thought of Dad in his prime, the tall man who taught me to drive, took me to Red Sox games, told stories of Grandpa's immigrant American dream. Now he was smaller, but his love for me remained intact, just expressed differently. A longer handhold, a smile at my name, a sudden, "Thank you, honey." I had no regrets. Despite the loneliness, the exhaustion, knowing one day he might forget my name entirely. Because in those rare, lucid moments when he looked at me and said, "You're a good girl," I knew I was doing the right thing. And I learned that family isn't just big holiday dinners. It's quiet evenings together, morning coffee smells, falling leaves, and enduring love without words. One autumn afternoon last year, when the maple leaves outside the Concord window blazed like fire, I came home from shopping and sensed something different in the house. The old house was usually quiet at that hour, just the ticking clock and faint TV weather report. But that day, there were low voices from Dad's old study, where he once spent hours on technical drawings for General Electric. I set the grocery bags in the kitchen, quietly approached. The door was ajar. I heard Dad's voice, clear, firm, no trace of confusion. "James, I've thought about it carefully. I want to amend the will. The house, everything, goes to Emily." I froze outside the door. James Harlan, the family lawyer Dad had known since his Boston days, replied in a calm voice, "Are you sure, Bill? This is a big decision." "I'm surer of this than anything in recent years," Dad said, voice steady. "Emily gave up everything to be here with me.
She deserves it. I wanted to push the door open, but my feet were rooted. This was one of those rare days Dad was completely lucid, as if a window had opened in his mind, and he was using every last second of it. I didn't know Dad had called Mr. Harlan while I was out shopping. He didn't want me present. He didn't want me to feel pressured, didn't want me to interfere. The decision had to be entirely his.
That afternoon, Dad sat at the kitchen table with me after the lawyer left. Gentle autumn sunlight streamed through the window, falling on his face. Once strong, now gaunt, but his eyes were unusually clear that day. "Emily," he began, voice slow but firm, "I've amended the will." I set down my coffee cup, heart pounding. "What did you change, Dad?" "This house will be yours." I shook my head immediately. "No, Dad, you don't have to. I'm here because I want to be, not for the house or anything." Dad looked at me long, eyes warm but resolute. The look of the man who taught me to drive on Concord's country roads, who said in America, success must be earned. "Listen to me." He took my hand. "I know you're not doing it for money. That's exactly why I want you to have it. You gave up your Boston apartment, your rising career, friends, your own life, to be here with me every day. You make my coffee every morning, drive me to doctors, sit listening to my old stories over and over. You never complain." I wanted to say something, but my throat tightened. "Sarah has her own life," he continued, voice gentle but certain. "She has a husband, kids, a career. And you chose to stay with me. This isn't a reward, Emily. It's fairness. Fairness isn't always equal in America. Fairness isn't always splitting everything evenly. Some things must go to the person who deserves it, who earned it through their own sacrifice." I remembered all the times Dad talked about earned success, the kind he was most proud of in this country. Grandpa immigrated from Ireland with nothing. Dad worked hard to buy this house, paid the mortgage on time, raised Sarah and me. To him, leaving the house to me wasn't favoritism. It was acknowledging the truth. I was the one who stayed. "I don't want you fighting anyone later," he added. "I want you to have a solid place, a real home that's truly yours." I cried, couldn't hold it back. "I don't need the house, Dad. I just need you healthy." He smiled sadly. "I know, but I won't be healthy forever, and I want to do this while I'm still lucid enough to decide." I hugged him for a long time. Then I nodded. Not for the house, but because I understood this was his way of saying thank you, the deepest thank you a father could give his daughter. Mom found out that same day. She came home that evening carrying a bag of apples from the farmer's market. Dad told her in front of me. Mom was quiet, nodded, but I saw her eyes twitch slightly. She didn't object then. She just said, "If that's what you want, I respect it." But I didn't know later, when Sarah started whispering doubts in her ear, that I had manipulated Dad, that he wasn't lucid when he signed, that family should split equally for fairness. Mom would gradually be swayed. She would be silent at first, then fully believe her older daughter, the one who was dazzlingly successful in her eyes. She would forget how lucid Dad was that afternoon, forget that she herself had been exhausted, and knew I was the only one who stayed. Back then, I only knew Dad had given me the greatest gift. Not just the colonial house with its white porch and backyard full of maple leaves, but acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that the years I quietly sacrificed were not in vain. I never imagined that gift would become the spark for the family's biggest conflict. Back then, I just hugged Dad, feeling his frail warmth, and whispered, "Thank you, Dad." And in that moment, the old house in Concord truly became mine, not because of paperwork, but because of a father's love, given with all the clarity he had left. After the afternoon Dad amended the will, everything stayed peaceful for the first few months. I still cared for him daily, still made morning coffee, still listened to his old stories under the blazing red maples of Concord. But then small signs began to appear,
like cold winds signaling an approaching New England winter. First came a call from Aunt Clara, Mom's sister, her voice hesitant, polite, but full of implication. "Emily, I just talked to Sarah. She says your dad might not have been fully lucid when he changed the will. Are you sure he understood what he was signing?" I was silent for a moment. "Aunt Clara, that day he was very clear. Mr. Harlan was there, and Dad explained it plainly." She sighed. "I'm just asking. Our family needs unity." Then a text from Uncle Robert. "Heard the house will go only to you. You should reconsider, for the good of everyone." I didn't reply right away. I felt a heaviness spreading, like thick snow obscuring a familiar country road. Sarah had begun her campaign. I didn't witness her first call. I only saw the consequences, the small shifts in everyone's attitude. Sarah called Aunt Clara, Uncle Robert, then the cousins. She spoke gently, full of concern, the way she persuaded clients to buy Cambridge homes. "I'm just worried about Dad. Emily's home all the time. Dad gets confused. Who knows what he really wanted when he signed papers?" She didn't accuse directly. She just planted seeds of doubt. Sarah had her own reasons. I learned them later, when everything was clear. Tom, her husband, had failed in a major Seaport Boston real estate investment. They owed the bank hundreds of thousands, a debt that a large Concord house could help alleviate. Sarah never admitted it, but financial pressure made her see the old family home as an escape, and she needed everyone on her side. Mom was swayed fastest. At first, she stayed silent. She knew how lucid Dad was that afternoon. But Sarah called daily, skillfully reminding, "Mom, I need the house more. My family is struggling. Emily's single. She can rent anywhere. I have a husband and grandkids." Mom began to waver. She said to me once, hesitantly, "Sarah needs the house more than you, Emily. She has a family to support." It hurt, but I wasn't surprised. Mom had always been proudest of Sarah, the child selling million-dollar homes, featured in local papers with her professional smile, and me, just the daughter who came home to care for an aging father. The political divide between us sisters made it worse. Sarah had grown increasingly conservative, strongly supporting low taxes, opposing social programs, often talking about the American dream is something you earn yourself. I leaned more liberal, donating to environmental and women's rights organizations. In past family dinners, we had lightly debated Trump or Biden, climate change or immigration. Sarah would often smirk. "You're too idealistic, Emily. Life isn't that simple." Now Sarah used that very difference to spread rumors faster. She posted in the family group chat, "As everyone sees, Emily always has different views. Now she's convinced Dad to take the house. Our family needs to unite around traditional values." Her vague Facebook posts, no names, but everyone knew. Sad to see family loyalty tested by modern ideas. Remember our true values. Aunt Clara commented, "Exactly. Unity above all." Uncle Robert liked with red hearts. The rumors spread like wildfire through dense New England woods. Cousins texted with questions, but full of suspicion. Her dad wasn't lucid when he signed the will. I answered briefly, but few believed. They believed Sarah, the successful one, always appearing with a confident smile and stories of thriving deals. I felt more isolated than ever. Evenings at home, after Dad slept, I sat alone in the kitchen, looking out into the dark. Wind howled through the maples, leaves rustling. I thought about what Americans call fake unity, the forced togetherness many families maintain during holidays. We smile around the Thanksgiving table, clap for each other, but when real conflict arises, everything shatters quickly. Unity only exists when no one touches personal interests. I didn't fight back. I didn't call each person to explain. I just kept caring for Dad, kept making morning coffee, kept listening to his old stories. But the loneliness grew heavier. I realized family love isn't always unconditional as books teach. Sometimes it's clouded by money, favoritism, poisonous whispers. Sarah didn't stop. She called more people, sent more messages. She turned me into the betrayer, the daughter exploiting an elderly father for property. And Mom, gradually, stood fully with her. I only had the old house, Dad, and the truth I knew clearly in my heart.
I didn't yet know I would soon find evidence to turn everything around. Back then, I just tried to stay calm, tried to believe the truth would win, like Americans still believe in justice, even when it comes late. One winter evening last year, as snow began falling lightly outside the Concord window, I decided to clean Dad's old study, a room I had avoided for months because it held too many memories. Dad once sat there for hours with technical drawings, an old computer, and meticulously organized files, reflecting his personality. Now dust covered everything, papers piled up, and I knew I couldn't delay any longer. I turned on the old desk lamp, the scent of old paper and pine faint. Dad had gone to bed early. Mom was at Sarah's a few miles away. I started with cardboard boxes in the corner, sorting old bills, tax receipts, and financial papers from when Dad was healthy. My hands moved through each stack, trying to stay calm despite the heavy heart. Then I found a thin envelope, no name, tucked among old bank files. Not Dad's handwriting, printed from the bank. I opened it, and my heart stopped. It was a statement from the joint savings account Dad had long ago opened, the one the whole family knew about, but only Dad and Mom had primary access to. The numbers danced before my eyes. $9,200 withdrawn April 22nd, $14,500 August 18th, $11,000 November 3rd, all transferred to another account. Nearly $100,000 over 2 years. It didn't match Dad's spending habits. He was always frugal, even stingy with himself. I slumped into Dad's old leather chair, hands trembling slightly. I opened the banking app on my phone. I had secondary access to help pay bills since he started forgetting. I checked the detailed transaction history. The withdrawals were online transfers from a mobile device. IP address, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Sarah's house. I didn't cry. I just felt an icy chill spread from my chest to my limbs, despite the heater running. I kept digging, hoping for an explanation. Maybe Dad had lent Sarah money, maybe to help the family. But instead, I found small notes tucked in another file, Dad's shaky handwriting, dates jumbled. Sarah withdrew $9,200. She said to pay Dad's debt? Check again. Missing money again. Ask Sarah one more time. Don't remember authorizing transfer. Emily doesn't know. Those lines cut like knives. Dad had noticed, fleetingly, in his rare lucid days. He had suspected, tried to record it, but then forgot and never got answers. Sarah had exploited his very confusion, days he no longer remembered passwords, no longer checked statements, to withdraw money gradually, systematically. I sat there for hours under the dim yellow desk light, snow falling thick outside. I opened my laptop, logged into the bank again, printed every suspicious transaction. I organized them by date, highlighted in red the transfers to Sarah Carter Hayes' account. Then I called the Bank of America support line, pretending to be Dad, using a shaky voice I'd practiced, to request details. The representative confirmed. Transactions approved via the app, using registered fingerprint. I knew whose fingerprint it was. Sarah had once helped Dad set up the banking app, bragging it was to make managing Dad's finances easier. Inner conflict tore at me. One part wanted to call the police immediately. This was fraud, exploitation of a senior, potentially criminal in Massachusetts. I pictured Sarah in handcuffs, investigated, the family completely destroyed. Another part, the daughter, the sister, fought fiercely. Calling police meant destroying not just Sarah, but Mom, the nieces and nephews I once held. It meant turning family pain into a public case. I sat until late, head in hands. I thought of Dad, the man who taught me that in America, justice matters, but family is the foundation. I thought of old Thanksgivings, when Sarah and I were little, baking pumpkin pie with Mom. I thought of how terrified Sarah must have been of exposure. That fear had driven her to build an entire campaign smearing me, turning me into the greedy one to cover her crime. Finally, I decided not to call police. Not yet. I would use the evidence within the family first, to protect Dad, to protect the truth, and to see how Sarah would face it with no escape. The next morning, I called Lawyer Harlan.
his voice calm over the phone. "Bring all the documents to my office, Emily. This is serious." I gathered everything into a navy blue folder. Statements, Dad's notes, bank confirmation emails. I looked at the folder on the table, heavy as a time bomb.
Sarah had long feared exposure. Now she would have to face it. I didn't yet know this folder would be opened at the upcoming Thanksgiving dinner, when the family thought they had finally excluded me. Back then, I only knew one thing. The truth, however painful, had to be placed on the table. That year's Thanksgiving dinner was the climax of everything, like a sudden New England snowstorm after days of rumbling warnings. I knew it was coming. Sarah had messaged the family a week earlier. "We need a special evening to discuss the family's future." I knew what discussed meant. I also had the navy blue folder ready in my bag, placed right by my chair leg. The old Concord house glowed with warm yellow lights, the scent of roasted turkey with sage and onion stuffing filling every corner. Pumpkin pie, marshmallow-topped sweet potato casserole, vibrant cranberry sauce, everything perfect as always. The living room TV played the Patriots versus Lions game, excited commentator voices mixing with everyone's laughter. Aunt Clara, Uncle Robert, Jake, Lily, Tom Hayes, Sarah's husband, all present. My mother, Margaret, bustled between kitchen and table, trying to keep her old teacher smile. Dad sat at the head, gaze dreamy, occasionally smiling when greeted. The atmosphere started warm, artificial. Everyone raised glasses, shared what we're grateful for, per tradition. Sarah talked about her successful home sales, her 2 kids in good schools. Mom nodded proudly. I sat quietly, feeling every glance, some pitying, some contemptuous. I knew they believed Sarah's story, that I had manipulated Dad to take the house. When dessert was served, Sarah stood. She wore an elegant red wool dress, hair in a high bun, smile confident like a TV host. The TV still blared from the next room, cheers as the Patriots scored a touchdown. "Before we end this wonderful evening," Sarah began, voice sweet but loud enough to overpower the commentator, "I want to say a few words about our family." Everyone fell silent instantly. Someone, probably Tom, ran to turn off the TV. The football sound vanished abruptly, leaving heavy silence where you could hear the wall clock ticking. Sarah looked around the table, gaze lingering on Mom, then Dad, then finally me. "In the past year, we faced many challenges," she continued, tone growing solemn. "Disagreements, decisions that hurt family unity. After many private talks, after all of us thought carefully, we've reached a collective decision." Mom nodded encouragingly. Dad looked down at his remaining pumpkin pie. "We voted," Sarah said, voice rising, confident. "And Emily, you're not family anymore." The room was dead silent. Then clapping began, Aunt Clara first, then Uncle Robert, Jake, Lily. Tom Hayes laughed loudly, raising his glass. Mom looked at me, eyes red, whispering, "This is for unity, Emily. We need to protect the real family." I felt the weight of every stare, but I didn't feel the pain they expected. I only felt clarity, chilling clarity. I smiled faintly, slowly reached into my bag. The navy blue folder was there, heavy as a verdict. I slid it across the oak table, stopping it right in front of Sarah. "I guess you won't need this anymore," I said, voice even, neither loud nor soft. Sarah looked at the folder, then at me. She smirked, the smile of certain victory. She opened it. First page, bank statement with large withdrawals highlighted in red. Her eyes scanned quickly. The smile vanished. Second page, Dad's shaky handwritten notes. Ask Sarah about missing money. Her face went pale. Third page, bank confirmation emails. Sarah shot up, chair scraping harshly, wood screeching against the floor. A shattered scream burst from her throat. No words, just raw despair, pain, exposure. The room went dead. Mom, Margaret Carter, raised a hand to her mouth, eyes wide, staring at her older daughter. "Sarah," she whispered, voice trembling, "is this true? You took your father's money." Sarah couldn't answer. She clutched the folder, tears falling, stammering, "No, it's not. Emily, she made it up." Uncle Robert stood abruptly, voice louder than usual. "Sarah, calm down. Explain." "What is this?" Aunt Clara looked at her husband, then Mom, then me, for the first time without doubt. Jake and Lily sat frozen. Tom Hayes' face was bloodless, hand gripping his wine glass. Dad frowned, gaze distant but somehow awakening. He looked at Sarah, then me, as if trying to remember something. I still sat motionless, said nothing more. No need. The truth was there, on the Thanksgiving table, among cold leftover food, half-empty wine glasses, heavier silence than any accusation. I thought of what Dad once taught me. In America, truth over blood. Truth matters more than blood ties. Family isn't immutable. It's built on honesty, responsibility, presence when it matters most. Sarah had chosen money over truth, and now she had to face the consequences, before the very people who had clapped for her. I didn't feel victory, just relief. Relief that finally the truth was spoken. Relief that I no longer carried the burden alone. That Thanksgiving dinner didn't end with laughter or toasts. It ended in silence. The silence of people realizing fake unity can't hide the truth forever. And in that silence, I knew I had chosen right, chosen truth, however painful. In the weeks after that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, silence enveloped the family like thick Concord snow, cold, heavy, and slow to melt. No more lively group chats, no weekend invitations. My old house still stood, maples bare, but now it truly held only Dad and me, and the exposed truth. Sarah suffered the heaviest consequences. The scandal spread quickly in Cambridge real estate circles. Rumors of her withdrawing money from her ill father's account traveled through private conversations, then reached partners and clients. Her sales plummeted. Tom Hayes, her husband, who had laughed loudest when Sarah declared me out of the family, no longer laughed. He discovered the full extent of the debt, much of it hidden by her to maintain their lavish lifestyle. Big house, German cars, private schools. When the folder's copy was officially sent by lawyer Harlan to the bank for internal investigation, Tom filed for divorce just 3 weeks later. He moved out, taking the 2 children, leaving Sarah alone in the large house now filled with legal papers. It didn't stop at divorce. Bank of America reported the suspicious transactions to authorities. Because of the large amount and involvement of a cognitively impaired senior, the FBI joined the fraud investigation. Sarah hired her own lawyer, attended interrogations. She wasn't jailed immediately, perhaps due to family circumstances and partial repayment, but her reputation was ruined. Her old, vague Facebook posts were deleted, replaced by absolute social media silence. My mother, Margaret, changed most slowly but profoundly. At first, she fiercely defended Sarah. She was just borrowing, she'll pay it back. But when she read all of Dad's shaky handwritten notes, when lawyer Harlan explained Sarah's actions could be criminally prosecuted, she collapsed. She came to my house one icy winter afternoon, unannounced, in her familiar old coat, eyes swollen. "Emily," she said at the door, voice breaking. "I'm sorry." I led her into the kitchen, made hot tea like she once made for me. She sat at the oak table, the very table where Dad signed the will, and cried. "I believed Sarah. I thought you were selfish for keeping the house. I was blind. I'm sorry to you and sorry to your father." I hugged her. It wasn't easy, but I did. She had lost a daughter in the worst way, not death, but betrayal, and she realized she had contributed to that campaign. Dad didn't understand everything, his memory now only fragments, but he sensed the change. Once he looked at me and asked, "Why doesn't Sarah visit anymore?" I just said, "She's dizzy, Dad." He nodded, asked no more. Lawyer Harlan called me a few weeks later. "Emily, we have enough evidence for a civil suit for restitution, even to support criminal prosecution if you want, large amount, and exploitation of a senior." I thought long. Suing meant prolonging the pain, meaning Sarah could lose everything, meaning Mom couldn't bear it. I chose not to. Let the bank and authorities do their job, I told Harlan. I want to heal. Not for Sarah, but for Mom, for Dad, and for myself. The family fell apart, but strangely, it became more real. Aunt Clara and Uncle Robert sent handwritten apology letters, admitting they had followed Sarah without investigating. They no longer visited often, but the fakeness was gone. Jake and Lily, the cousins, texted to check on Dad for the first time in months. Sarah made no contact. I heard she moved to a smaller apartment alone. Real estate work nearly halted. I didn't gloat, just felt sad. Sad for the sister who once threw snowballs with me as kids, who shared pumpkin pie and old Thanksgivings. One spring evening later, Mom visited more regularly. She brought flower seeds, the kind she once planted in the backyard. We planted together under early warm sun. She spoke little, but stayed longer each time. "Do you forgive me?" she asked once, hands full of dirt. I paused, looked at her. "I'm trying, Mom. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but I choose not to let the past define the future." She nodded, eyes glistening. We kept planting, tulips that would bloom brilliantly next fall, beside the maples green again. The family was no longer as before. No more big crowded dinners, no forced laughter. But what remained was real. Mom learning to look at me with pride instead of comparison. Dad still smiling when I made morning coffee. And me learning that healing doesn't require everything to return to normal, just enough to keep living. The consequences were painful, but they taught me that real family isn't those sharing blood around a grand Thanksgiving table. It's those who choose to stay, choose honesty, choose love, even when everything has shattered. I chose forgiveness, not complete, but enough for the old Concord house to have gentle evening laughter again, enough for Mom to sit with Dad without heavy guilt. And enough for me to know that though I lost much, I still had what mattered most, clarity and a home truly my own. After that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, my life gradually settled like the Charles River after winter thaw, slow, peaceful, and clearer than ever. The old Concord house no longer echoed with fake laughter or hidden arguments, only the rustle of maple leaves outside, the steady ticking clock, and Dad asking each morning, "Emily, coffee ready yet?" Dad was still the same, memory fading more, but he smiled when he saw me, held my hand a little longer each night before sleep. Mom visited more often, no longer bringing comparisons to Sarah. She stayed for dinner, helped plant more flowers in the backyard, sometimes sat quietly with Dad, eyes red from regret. We didn't talk much about the past, but her presence was enough to heal part of the wound. I found true peace in simple things. Every morning I brewed coffee, sat by the window watching snow or blazing autumn leaves, feeling this house truly mine, not just on paper, but because I stayed, cared, chose love when everyone turned away. I was no longer as lonely. Old Boston friends started visiting more. Real friends, no judgment, no scorekeeping. We laughed about work, books, trips I could now dream of. The next Thanksgiving, I hosted a small gathering, not crowded as before, but warmer and more genuine. Just Mom, a few close college friends, and surprisingly, Jake and Lily. They asked to come. They brought homemade pumpkin pie, apologized for believing Sarah without asking me. We sat around the old table, roasted a small turkey, watched the Patriots on TV, and took turns sharing what we were grateful for. No one mentioned Sarah. No need. That dinner wasn't perfect in the traditional American big family way, but it was real enough that I nearly cried raising my glass. I began thinking about the future. With more free time as Dad stabilized with part-time nursing covered by insurance, I decided to start a business, a small remote marketing agency for local New England businesses. I started with old clients, gradually expanded. The work brought steady income, and more importantly, a sense of autonomy, something I had lost in the years caring for Dad. I set up my office in Dad's old study, where autumn sunlight streamed through the window just like the day he signed the will. Each time I sat there, I remembered his words. "Earned success, Emily. That's the real American dream. I also reconnected with Jake and Lily. They were grown, in college, and gradually saw the truth about their mother. They visited Dad more, bringing board games or just sitting telling college stories. They apologized many times, and I forgave, not out of duty, but because I saw their sincerity. Sarah had lost. They became a small part of my new family, not perfect, but genuine. Sarah remained silent. I heard she lived alone, work difficult, but I didn't reach out. Maybe one day she'll face it and apologize. Maybe not. I no longer waited. Quiet evenings, I often sat by the fireplace, looking out at the backyard where tulips had bloomed brilliantly. I reflected on the long journey, from the single woman who gave up everything to care for her father, to the woman disowned by her own family, to finally finding peace in the very house that was once a battlefield. I realized family isn't blood, isn't big holiday dinners or empty toasts. Family is those who choose honesty when it's hard, choose responsibility when it's easy to walk away, choose to stay when no one asks. That's the deepest American lesson I learned. Pursuit of happiness isn't chasing fake perfection, but pursuing clarity, authenticity, and the right to live true to yourself. Clarity changed everything. It was painful, it destroyed, but it also healed. And peace came when I accepted I didn't need everything back as before, just enough to move forward. My parents backed my sister as she declared, "You're not family anymore." I just found my real family. Not in those sharing blood around a grand Thanksgiving table, but in those who chose to stay with me. Mom with quiet flower planting afternoons, Jake and Lily with genuine smiles, friends with judgment-free conversations, and myself, who learned to love myself enough to forgive without forgetting. The old Concord house is no longer a place of dispute. It's where I live, where I dream, where I know that though I lost much, I still have everything I need, a true home, a clear heart, and a future I build myself. And that is my American dream.